Hello, I'm Anne Kerr. Welcome back to my art studio. In the last video, we looked at painting some background trees. Now in this video, I'm going to show you how I painted the reflections of those background trees, and I'll do it step by step so you can follow along very easily. So, are you ready? If you haven't yet watched the last video where I did the background trees, then go and watch that whenever you can. And in this video, I'm going to do the reflections for the trees, and I'm going to do most of it wet in wet, and I'll do it step by step. So if you want to, you can follow along with me, or you can wait and get your paints out later on and keep stopping and rewinding the video and do it at your leisure. So here we go. This is the painting we did last week, and now we're going to put in the reflections of all the trees into the water area underneath. So the first thing I'm going to do is to wet my paper. I always paint on wet paper as often as I possibly can, because it gives me those lovely soft edges. Sometimes you need hard edges where you've got things like trees, but where you want the beautiful soft edges, the only way to get those is to paint on wet paper. Now I'm actually living in an area where it's very, very hot. I live in Spain and it's nearly 40 degrees today, so I'm going to have to paint very quickly because my paint is going to dry incredibly fast. Right, so now that that's wet, I'm going to pick up my colours and I'm just going to drop those underneath where I had the other colours before. Can you see how that's spreading so beautifully? So I'm going to drop those in roughly underneath where those colours were before and let them spread down into the water. Now I find this really is the best way to do reflections in water, because I love these beautiful, beautiful soft edges. So as I said, I'm having to paint this incredibly fast because it is so warm out here, and my paint is already beginning to dry quite quickly. So I'm just trying to match the colours that are just above them in the painting, not being too fussy about it. Come into my yellow, drop my yellow in there, drop a bit of my sienna. I'll put the colours that I'm using back up on the screen so that if you didn't watch last week's video, you will know the exact colours that I'm using at the moment. And they are raw sienna light, transparent red oxide, and cobalt blue. But as I said, I will put those up on the screen for you. So just try and match the colours that you've got just above there. I'm going at 90 miles an hour here because it's drying very quickly, trying to match that colour up there. And we've got some more some more transparent red oxide over here. And then we've got our big tree that comes down. So here comes my big tree. And that's going to break up into areas down here. Take my bigger brush and just drop in just a little bit of sky blue down here. I don't need much. There we go. And that will always be a little bit darker at the bottom, like it is dark at the top up there. So just try and reflect that as well. I didn't want to put the blue right up under here because it will alter the colours that I'm putting in for my reflections. If you notice, I've left a little bit of white up here because I'm going to go back and just touch that in later, and just to bring it back up to the bank. Now, if you want to go back and darken these colours, then you need to make sure that the paint you're going back in with is a little bit stronger, more concentrated than the paint that you had in there before. Otherwise, you're going to get runbacks. So this paint now is a little bit stronger, a little bit more concentrated than the original one that I put in. This here is not quite dark enough, so I'm going to go in with slightly more concentrated paint to make that a bit darker, remembering that because this is mixing with the water that's already on the paper, it's going to dilute it. So you want to make your colours slightly darker than you really want them when it's dry. So here comes this tree. See how that's mixing into the, softening into the wet paper. As I said, you don't need to be over fussy about it. You just want to roughly reflect the colours that are up there at the moment. And a little bit more of the dark over here, I think. So I'm going to make my mix that a little bit stronger because I'm coming in over what I've done already. So I want to make that just that little bit stronger, a little bit darker there, a bit darker there. See how this is all blending so beautifully? I love doing this, it's so exciting. I only paint on dry paper when I want to get details like this. Now I'll pick up my little rigger brush, slightly smaller brush, because I just want to indicate these little things here. I want them to blur into the water, so that's why I'm doing it while it's wet. I love this. A little bit too blurry there, so we'll just move that out a bit. There we go. Okay, so we'll let that bit dry off, and then we'll come back and put in a few little details, and then it's done. I'll see you in a few minutes. Just while we're waiting a few minutes for that to dry, if you haven't already seen the original painting that I did, remember to go and watch that when you can. And if you're enjoying this video, please give me a comment in the description down below. It's always lovely to hear from people. So let's get back to the painting. Okay, so this is now completely dry. So I'm just going to come in now with my smaller brushes and do a little bit of painting wet on to dry. So here where I've got the little sort of spiky twigs and things, I'm just going to reinforce those a little bit with my little rigger brush. And over here as well. Over here. Take some of the paint out of my brush and just do a little wiggle here and there. There we go. And then over here we've got a few little branches, so we'll just quickly pop those in, just very roughly. So I've got a tiny little bit of white gouache, because that's opaque, mixed up with a little bit of my green. So I'm just popping those in, because this will be opaque and it'll show up on top of the on top of the drop of the dark paint. And then I'll break up this little line here a little bit more. So what you don't want is one continual white line along there, because it looks very artificial. Just use whatever's on your palette. It's what I call the magical colour of palette muck. Love it. And then I'll take my little craft knife and I'll just scratch in a few little marks here and there. You can use any sort of technique you like as long as it works. No rules, no rights, no wrongs. If it works, it works. And then I'm going to take my very small little rigger brush, and again, using any of the colours that are left in my palette, so little bits of something that's in my palette, and just put one or two little streaks, little tiny marks here and there. Make sure they're horizontal, otherwise you'll have water running downhill, which never looks quite right. Just pop those in here and there. And also we can come down here and put a few little blue ones in the water in the foreground. Don't overdo it, you can go mad with this. And then if I take my flat brush, and you want a brush that's got fairly stiff hairs. A natural hairbrush that's very floppy won't work for this. So you need to have something that's got fairly stiff bristles, or hairs rather, and make it come to a nice chisel edge, and your brush needs to be damp but not wet. So I put it in my water and I just squeezed out the water that was in it, and then I can run this along here. I've got a tissue in my other hand, and I can take out what we call little wind lines. Now this will show up best if you do it on the areas that are dark. Won't show up very well if you do it over the light areas. So just rub your brush up and down and take out little marks like that, and then blot it with a tissue just to take out the colour. Yeah, I don't think I'll do any more to that. When you start doing things like this, you think, oh, that looks good, I'll do another one. No. Just do one or two and then leave it alone. So now I'm going to take off the clips and the tapes around the outside, and we'll have a look. When you take tapes off a painting, always pull your tape away from the painting. If you pull it this way across the painting, if it's very slightly damp in places, there is a chance you could rip your paper. And after doing all this work, that's the last thing you want to do. So pull it away from your work. Right, so here we have the finished painting. As I said last week, if you watched the video last week, we did this part of the painting, and if you didn't watch last week's video, you can find it in the description down below this video. So you can go and watch that now if you want to. And now, today, what we've done is we've done the reflections underneath using exactly the same colours and just trying to mirror the images above. And everything except the fine details was painted on wet paper. That's how you can get these beautiful, beautiful soft edges. You can't get those soft edges if you're painting on dry paper, because when you paint on dry paper, this is what you get. It's the hard edges. And all good watercolour painting should be a mixture, really, of both. So I hope you have a go at that painting. If you put the video on and keep stopping it and following it step by step, I'm sure you'll do a fantastic job. Watercolour reflections can be painted directly onto dry paper. However, I prefer to do it on wet paper because it gives those lovely, lovely soft edges like the ones that you watched me do just now. However, the way you do it is entirely up to you. In painting, there are no rights and no wrongs. It's whatever pleases you at the end of the day. If you haven't done so already, then do click that subscribe button and the little bell icon, and that will let you know when I upload another video. If you've enjoyed this one, then click the little thumbs up. And thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time. Remember everybody, there is an artist in everyone. Goodbye for now.